Welcome. My name is Lisa Pope. I'm the president of the Upper Downtown Neighborhood Association. I'm so glad that you guys could come for our Denver District Attorney debate, very important election coming up. This is actually our third debate that we've hosted. We hosted two last year for the District 10 City Council position, and you maybe lose track. And so last year when we hosted those two, we partnered with LoDoNA. You'll meet David Mazzocchi here in just a minute. And we're excited that this year for this debate, we've also partnered with LoDo District, and you'll meet Marty in just a minute. But I want to take just a second to thank some people. We've had an election committee that we've been together 2 years now to set up these three debates. We have Rob Squire, who's working on the PowerPoint. David Mazzocchi with LoDoNA, Marty Steinberg with LoDo District. We have David Howard, who is our timekeeper this evening. And I also want to thank David Dixon. He's with Gratitude Cove. He's our videographer this evening. Once he edits this, it'll be posted on the LoDoNA website, the UpDoNA website, updona.org, and our YouTube channel. So feel free to pass that along to other people. And then also I want to give a shout out to two new members of our election committee, Lisa Dress, who is with Riot House Hospitality, and Dr. Jia, who is here. She's a criminal justice professor at MSU. And she has some students we believe are on their way, so I think that's super cool to have some students learning the process and being involved. So with that, thank you again, and David, there you go.
So I'm David Mazzocchi, and I'm with Lower Downtown Neighborhood Association, otherwise called LoDoNA. And to put on an event like this obviously requires a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of volunteers. Also, I want to recognize a couple of our Denver police that are here with us tonight. We have officers Kelly Boyd and Officer Evan Morton. They're probably mad at me for calling him out like that. But anyway, thank you very much for being here. And we all appreciate the effort that they put in to protect us and keep us all safe. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Marty Steinberg from LoDo District.
Welcome. My name is Marty Steinberg. I'm with the LoDo District. I'm co-chair of it. And just a little procedural things. In about an hour, we'll probably take a 10-minute break, an hour break. We'll take a 10-minute break in about an hour. And I would like to introduce Michael Spencer, who's our moderator for tonight, and he's with CBS Colorado, and he will be moderating the debate or discussion tonight. And one last thing is, please make sure your cell phones are turned off, and thank you.
Thank you, Marty, and good evening. As you just heard, my name is Michael Spencer. I'm the evening anchor at CBS News Colorado. It's my privilege to be here with you tonight, and at this time I'd like to introduce your candidates for the office of Denver District Attorney. At the end of the introduction, the audience will have one opportunity to applaud the candidates, after which we will ask for silence from everyone in the room, with the exception of the people speaking. So ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce Leora Joseph and John Walsh. Candidates, thank you both for being here tonight. Let's talk about our plans for the evening. Each of you will be given the opportunity to introduce yourself for 3 minutes. Please tell us about yourself, about your background, and about your top prosecutorial priorities. And in addition to that, tell us why you are the best candidate for Denver's district attorney. After that, I'll ask a series of 6 prepared questions, which you received a couple minutes ago. For the first 5 questions, each of you will have 3 minutes to answer the same question. Afterward, your opponent will have 1 minute for a rebuttal. I'll change the order in which candidates respond as we move from opening statements to the questions, and then finally to the closing statements. There's also a quick 6th question, which is a yes or no answer, but you will each have 1 minute for your answer in case you would like to elaborate. There will be no rebuttal for the 6th question. In an attempt to point out the differences between the two of you, you will each have prepared 2 questions for the other, which you will ask following my questions. answers will be 3 minutes, and after the last question is complete, you will each be given 3 minutes for your closing statements. This debate is expected to last 90 minutes. We will be planning a 10-minute break after question number 4. The audience is encouraged to leave quietly if you must at any other time other than the midway break. UpDoNA, LoDoNA, and LoDo District are concerned about crime levels in downtown Denver. Crime levels affect the quality of life of residents.
Opening statements, right? Excuse me.
I have opening statements after that.
Okay, excuse me, go ahead.
All right. I can skip.
Go ahead.
It's always good to break the ice.
Yeah, for sure. We can ad lib and we'll get to that after the opening statements.
Tell me about that staying quiet.
UpDoNA, LoDoNA, and the LoDo District are concerned about crime levels in downtown Denver. Crime levels affect the quality of life of residents, and it makes visitors hesitant to come downtown, which affect business levels. While crime levels have been decreasing significantly in some categories, residents and businesses want continued progress. Most voters want the district attorney to ensure that criminals are held accountable for their actions. The questions we will be asking reflect our desire to understand your plans to address these issues, primarily in downtown Denver, but also citywide. A few rules before we begin tonight. The audience is asked to refrain from applauding or making any verbal comments whatsoever during the debate. Please remember that everyone has come tonight to hear the candidates' positions on the issues, not yours. Candidates are asked not to comment or interrupt one another, and we do have a tight timeline, so answers will be timed. When you have 30 seconds remaining, a nonverbal notice in the form of a yellow placard will be given by Mr. Howard. When you see a red placard, that indicates that your time is up. Please end your answers promptly at that time. Candidates are also asked to avoid generalities and to provide specific, comprehensive answers to questions. With all of that being said, I'd like to begin. I'd like to give each of you 3 minutes for an opening statement. Leora, we will begin with you.
Thank you so much. And if it's okay, I'm going to stand. That works. I won't sing, I promise. That's one of my commitments to all of you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Leora Joseph, and I'm running to be Denver's next district attorney because I love Denver. But this isn't the city I raised my kids in. We are at a pivotal moment in time for this beloved city, a time where we have daily instances of gun violence, a plague of fentanyl distribution, and everyday auto theft. We can do better. And I know we can do better and that the district attorney plays a role in that because I'm the only candidate that's actually worked in the district attorney's office, and I've done that for 20 years. For 20 years, I walked into courtrooms every day and said, I'm Leora Joseph for the people. And I'm running to bring that same accountability back to our city. We're going to hold people accountable for gun violence. We're going to hold drug dealers accountable, organized crime, and auto theft. But you know, it's the work I'm doing now for Governor Polis that has really affected my decision to run for office. I currently oversee an 1,800-person agency transitioning and transforming how we deliver mental health care to people caught up in the court system, particularly the criminal justice system. And in that work, I came to realize that we are in the middle of a mental health crisis that is manifesting as a public safety crisis. And I have real solutions to fix what's going on. We must create pathways to treatment. You know, being a prosecutor for over 20 years, I know how to do the job, but I also know when we need to account for the fact that things aren't working the way they are, and we need new ideas and new leadership to change how we handle people with severe mental illness and drug addiction, making sure they get the treatment they need out of the jails, off of our streets, and into healthcare. And that is a big part of my plan. Lastly, for the last 8 months, I've been meeting with voters around the city and realizing not only do we have a public safety crisis, not only do we have a mental health crisis, but we have a crisis because no one believes the justice system is working. And that is why my community engagement office will engage all of you, creating citizens' involvement in our office, running nonprofits, liaisons to the police, liaisons to the schools, because justice isn't something that lives behind a courtroom wall. It lives with all of you in community. Thank you all very much.
We want to thank you. John will now have you give your opening statement. 3 minutes.
So I'm John Walsh, and I'm also running for the Denver District Attorney spot. Denver's my hometown. I moved to Denver, the metro area, when I was 12. I don't come from a family of doctors and lawyers. My dad worked for the Social Security Administration his whole career, and my mom was a nurse. But what they taught the 5 of us kids growing up through their actions and their words was that service to others and service to the community is the highest calling. And that's how I've tried to live my life. I have spent a professional and personal lifetime in this city. My wife and I have lived in the Park Hill neighborhood for nearly 30 years now, raised 3 kids there, all of them graduates of the Denver public schools. I love the city, and I've always been so proud of the city. So watching over the last handful of years, the city's struggle with basic community safety issues has been nothing short of heartbreaking. Now, what does that mean? It means we're at a crucial moment in Denver and that we have to confront these issues, take them head on, and put Denver back on the wonderful trajectory it has been on for so long. The way we do that is with firm, fair, and energetic leadership from the district attorney. That's why I'm running. That's why I got in this race. So when President Obama pulled together all of us that he had nominated as U.S. attorneys and who had been confirmed by the Senate, the first words out of his mouth were, "You have to remember that you're not my U.S. attorneys. You're U.S. attorneys for the people." Those words have resonated with me ever since, and that's the kind of DA that I'm running to be, a DA for all of the people of Denver. To me, that means listening to people. And as I've crisscrossed this city, I've heard the frustrations people have with violent crime, with fentanyl, with the car theft epidemic that we've experienced. But I've also heard so much strength and hope and resilience from the people of the city that I have great confidence that we can turn these things around. I've spent a lifetime leading and energizing prosecutors, not only as the chief federal prosecutor for the state of Colorado, but also working in private practice and in community. Y porque hablo español con fluidez, he trabajado también en la comunidad hispanohablante como abogado y como socio con la gente. It is crucial that we have someone who knows prosecution, who knows community safety issues, and who knows this city intimately from a lifetime of being here as the DA. We need to be tough on crime, without a doubt. But we also need to be tough on the causes of crime with the community. That's why I'm running. I'm proud to have the endorsement of all 3 living Denver district attorneys, as well as former mayors Federico Pena, Wellington Webb, and John Hickenlooper. I need your help, though, and I need your vote in June to make this happen. So let's imagine a vibrant, a safe, and a just city, and make it happen together. Thank you.
John, thank you. That's the timer, so that's allowed. I'll now ask a series of questions. For each, I'll give a short introduction, and then I'll ask the first candidate to answer within 3 minutes, followed by 3 minutes for the other candidate. Following that, each candidate will have 1 minute for a rebuttal. As I mentioned earlier, the 6th question will be handled somewhat differently. Let's begin with question 1, which concerns the use of personal recognizance bonds, otherwise known as PR bonds. For background, when a person has been accused of a crime and held in jail, they're usually allowed to post a bond which allows them to go free while awaiting trial. Those who can't afford to pay a bond are often released on a personal recognizance bond, which allows them to go free without paying anything in exchange for a promise that they will return for the court date. Supporters of PR bonds believe that a person who has not been convicted of any crime should not be held in jail awaiting trial just because they can't afford to pay a bond. Critics say that when people are released on PR bonds without paying anything, they have nothing to lose by violating the conditions of their release. Those critics also argue that they often reoffend prior to their trial, sometimes repeatedly, and often fail to appear for their court date. That being said, the question is, do you support the use of PR bonds, yes or no? And in your mind, what would cause you to refuse to request the use of a PR bond for an individual that is a repeat offender or who has failed to appear for a court date? Since Leora went first with the opening statements, let's start with John with this first question. You each have 3 minutes.
So I do support the use of PR bonds in the right cases. And in fact, if you look at the statistics on PR bonds, the vast majority of people on PR bonds don't reoffend. Where I don't support the use of PR bonds, and I think they may be used right now excessively, is where there is actually a danger to the community posed by the person who has been arrested or a risk of flight. So to go to the question that's presented here, there are circumstances under which you have someone who gets a PR bond and they go and reoffend. To me, that is prima facie evidence that they should not get a PR bond again. It also suggests that we're not doing a great job of predicting who is actually going to go out and violate when we give a PR bond in the first place. Ultimately, these are decisions that are made by the courts, but I think it's incredibly important for the DA's office to take a strong stance when there is a question of safety to the community or the potential for risk of flight. I will note that on failures to appear, frequently there are situations in which people, for low-level offenses, simply they don't get the notice they need and they don't show up. I think on failure to appear, there should be a little bit more leeway given to people, but for reoffending, very little leeway at all.
Thank you, John. Leora?
Thank you. This is actually one of the hottest topics right now in criminal justice and in the space of criminal justice. And I think we have to look at the criminal justice system a lot the same way that we look at the education system and at the medical system. We've got to do things individualized. We've got to look at things on a case-by-case basis. Are there times when a PR bond is appropriate? Of course there are. A first offender who maybe trespassed, maybe they were inebriated one night and they went into someone's backyard by accident. That's a good example of someone with no criminal record who deserves a PR bond. But the reality is for violent crimes, the reality is for persistent recidivists, the reality is that we also have an obligation to keep our communities safe. And those people, when we have dangerous, I got a call about a year and a half ago about a woman who was murdered in cold blood on her front lawn by her husband. He had $1 million in his backpack and a passport. And the family was worried he was going to be able to post bond because they gave cash bond to him. And what I'll tell you is that there are instances like that there should be no bond. And I believe that for our most serious domestic violence offenders, for pedophiles, those are people we need to make sure that we are keeping our communities safe.
You'll each have 1 minute for rebuttal. John, you'll go first again.
So I want to build on some of the conversation here to say that I think we have a bond system in the state of Colorado that is in many ways broken and that we need to review and consider a wholesale reform. In the federal system that I operated in for years, there is the possibility of holding people without bond at all when they pose a risk to the community or risk of flight. I actually think that's something that Colorado would benefit from happening. On the flip side, I do think we need to make sure that we're accurately predicting when low-level offenders really don't pose a violation. So I would just echo the fact that this is an issue, I have to tell you, when I go around the city, this is an issue that gets raised more frequently than any other. We've got to address it. We have to do better.
Leora, 1 minute to you.
Thanks. It's 2024. We've got to use data and help courts understand how to make decisions better, weighing psychiatric factors, psychological factors, criminogenic factors for each individual person so that we can really make educated decisions. And it needs to be more than just release or hold. There needs to be other alternatives, like maybe GPS and curfew and home confinement. For things like that need to be part of this conversation, but agreed, we need a complete redo in our bond reform.
Thank you both. We'll now move on to question 2. Question 2 is about perceptions of the district attorney's office. The district attorney's job is to protect the people. However, sometimes there's a perception that the DA's office does more to protect criminals than it does to protect citizens. With that being said, the question is, do you agree that this public perception exists? And if so, what would you do to change that perception? If not, why do you think that this perception doesn't exist? This time we will start with you, Leora.
Thank you. You know, I've spent over 20 years in District Attorney's Office handling the most serious cases and making sure that victims' voices were raised and heard and that they got justice and protection from rapists and domestic violence offenders and human traffickers. And I believe that the role of the District Attorney is, in fact, to protect the public. At some point, there is a perception that that we're not using all the laws that exist right now to be able to enforce. I think there is a perception that we need to be not just dismissing cases, but looking at ways to have meaningful consequences for crime. I think that's missing right now. I think that we are in a situation now where people feel every day the consequences of dysregulated behavior, and it feels out of control. I would guess that almost everybody here knows someone whose car was broken into and no one was held accountable for it. And that isn't acceptable. And that's something I'm working to change.
John, 3 minutes to you.
So unfortunately, I do think this perception exists, and I'll give you an example. I talked to a West Side businessman who described to me, and I don't know if it was more anger or astonishment, that he'd had his car stolen 3 times in 2 months, and twice by the same person. That's the kind of experience that makes people worry about whether our criminal justice system is adequately protecting the community. It wraps back into the question we had about PR bonds, obviously, but it goes beyond that, really. And I want to focus on a different angle on this because I think it's crucial to understand that the DA's office needs to have a strong and effective working relationship with the police. I've spoken to so many police officers who have told me that they don't always feel supported by the DA's office. I don't know that that's always a fair description because I've talked to people in the DA's office who are working very hard to make a good relationship, but I do think that that is a situation that we need to correct. And one of my top priorities coming in as DA will be to make sure that relationship with the police department is strong and effective in a way that will enable the police to really step out and do the work that they need to do aggressively and know that they'll be supported. So there's another point that I want to make that I think is really important. We tend to catch people in law enforcement and the police side in situations where they haven't behaved perfectly, or maybe they've actually been engaged in misconduct. What we don't do a good job of is telling the good stories that happen every single day where police officers are saving lives and putting themselves at risk, and the good stories and the good reality of people in the DA's office who are working so hard to protect people in the community. I think it's so important that we work actively to build that trust in the community and make it a reality in the community, while at the same time making sure that all parts of our community get fair treatment from the police.
You'll each now have 1 minute for a rebuttal. Leora, we'll go to you.
I do agree that right now there is a perception and potentially a reality that people don't feel that there is accountability in our criminal justice system. And my number one priority is to bring back accountability. When people commit crimes, there needs to be consequences, and people need to understand what those are. That has to be transparent and available to the public to understand what's happening when someone's car is stolen. Why are decisions being made like that? And that is part of my commitment to all of you, to have a transparent office where people will be able to reach out to me directly. I will have a citizens oversight board in my office so people will understand how decisions are being made and why decisions are being made. And certainly, my partners in law enforcement will have quick communication and understand, and we will row in the same boat together. That is how we fix the system.
John, 1 minute to you.
So I want to focus on a couple of things here that are really important. Sometimes it is the sort of day-to-day failure to enforce the law that undermines people's confidence. I don't know how many times I've had people in forums and other events, talk about how many people are speeding through red lights, or how many temporary tags that we all see every day that are 2 years out of date, or maybe there are no license plates at all. Not all of that comes to the district attorney's office. But the reality is that we need to be sure that collectively, not just the DEA's office in a silo, but working with the city attorney's office, working with the police department, and all of the community, that we're doing a better job of ensuring that there is respect for the rule of law. And that's something that I think that the pandemic, because of the unique circumstances of that situation, really had the effect of undermining. And we need to kind of bring ourselves back to do that, get that rule of law back in place in a fair way.
For question 3, we'll solicit your opinion regarding the DA's prosecution of police officers. For background, qualified immunity is a legal concept in which a police officer who is acting with a reasonable, good faith belief that his or her actions do not violate a clearly established law is shielded from personal liability. Partially due to significant media attention to incidents of police misconduct in the past few years, the Colorado legislature passed SB 271 in 2020, which removed qualified immunity from Colorado police. Supporters of the removal often believe that the police should be held accountable to a higher standard, should be held liable for their action, and should be afforded little room for error. They also often believe that it makes the officer more careful about operating within the law. Critics of the 2020 legislation, which removed qualified immunity, often believe that the previous wording of the law was clear enough since it allowed prosecution if the officer was not acting with a reasonable good faith belief that his or her actions were legal. They also often believe that its removal makes officers hesitant to enforce the law if they think that there is any chance of being prosecuted. So the question is, do you believe that Denver police officers should have qualified immunity? In cases where it wasn't clear that an officer was acting with a reasonable, good faith belief that his or her actions were legal, would your tendency be to prosecute them or give them the benefit of the doubt? Stated differently, how much discretion should officers be granted in those gray areas? John, we'll begin with you, 3 minutes.
So I've worked on questions of police accountability for decades. I was actually the vice chair of the Public Safety Review Commission here in Denver, which was the commission before the current independent monitor. It was kind of a toothless tiger. It was an investigative and transparency sort of commission, but it was a real education to me in that area. And I've actually worked in private practice representing cities who were working with their police forces to change their use of force policies and update training and things of that sort. I want to be careful when we talk about qualified immunity, though, and I'm going to sound all lawyerly on you here now, that we recognize that qualified immunity is usually applied in the context of civil liability. And that when we're talking about prosecution, there's a different set of considerations that come into play. I'm not going to go too far down the qualified immunity civil side because that's not the DA's responsibility, but it's an area that I've actually got a lot of experience with because of my work in the federal government. I think it is crucially important that the DA maintain independence and neutrality in assessing cases of alleged police misconduct, and that the DA have the courage to make decisions whether to prosecute. Sometimes it takes as much courage to say that an officer should not be prosecuted from a political point of view. That's something I've done because as U.S. Attorney, I had those decisions presented to me and I had to act on them. So to go to your question more directly, should Denver police officers have qualified immunity? I think the harder question, or the more direct question is, how should the DA evaluate allegations of misconduct when deciding whether or not to prosecute an officer? And I think that it's incredibly important to recognize that there are moments in which an officer has to act in a split second, and that needs to be taken into account. On the flip side of that, if an officer has violated policies of the police department in a systematic way, or in a knowing way, or in a willing way, it is important for the DA to have the courage to bring a charge when it's necessary. So again, and I'll actually echo Leora on this, it is so important for the DA to look at cases individually and make the decision. I do think that we need to support our police officers to make sure that they're not going to have their houses taken away because of split-second decisions. What the DA does, though, is evaluate the conduct and bring cases only where the facts and the law merit it, and the way that we can build confidence in the police department on that is making sure there is a strong working relationship between the DA's office and the police department.
Leo, 3 minutes to you.
Thanks. You know, I've spent 20 years in the district attorney's office handling some of the most serious crimes, and I couldn't have done it without a real partnership with the police. I would get regular calls in the middle of the night, 2 in the morning, to handle a homicide, to handle a violent sexual assault. And I am so, and forever will be, thankful to our police departments for keeping us safe, for a job that is thankless, that doesn't pay enough, that has incredible amount of stress attached to it, and everybody's watching all the time. At the same time, part of my life has also been prosecuting police officers for domestic violence and sexual assault as well. And I've had to file IA complaints, internal affairs investigations complaints as well, with officers who didn't behave well. But you know, what I learned in taking on the church in Boston when I prosecuted the clergy for the crisis is that we must work with the institutions. And this is a situation where we have to work with the police department to improve training, to improve access to training, to understand implicit bias, to make sure that the police officers feel supported. And you can support people and hold them accountable. That's what we all do in our lives every day with our colleagues, with our families. And so those two things can exist together. Now, the issue of qualified immunity is a complicated one, and it has to be done on a case-by-case basis. We can't make, and everybody needs to be held and judged in the same standard. And we have to understand the full circumstances to know what decisions we're making. One thing that cannot play a role is politics. There is absolutely no role for politics in making decisions about prosecuting people. That can never be a reason to make a decision about immunity or a prosecution. Instead, we need to think about how we are all going to be connecting differently. We need to remember, and I want to say one more thing about the 2020 legislation. It introduced body cams. And I am a massive fan of body cams. That is the definition of transparency. I think that has done a ton for accountability, and it's done a ton to also show police how they are doing and allow the public access to what is going on in any moment. So I'm a very big fan of that piece of the 2020 legislation. And in conclusion, this qualified immunity issue is a complicated one, but I do believe we have to keep that, it's at the legislative level, and we need to be evaluating at the district attorney level on a case-by-case basis.
You'll each have 1 minute for a rebuttal. John, we'll start with you.
So just a couple of comments relating back to something I said earlier. We often focus on instances where there's some allegation of misconduct by police. And having watched a lot of body cam footage myself over the years, what we don't do a great job about is taking the body cam footage showing officers acting with incredible restraint and incredible courage. And that happens actually quite a bit. And I do think that the DA's office and the DA has a responsibility to get those stories out there too, so the full picture is presented to the public to inspire confidence in the public. And also so the police know they're being supported. I'm also a fan of body cams, but I'll note that they've been in place in Denver and in Colorado for over a decade now. We've been working with them quite a long time ago, before this legislation came together. I think it's so important for the confidence of the whole community that the DA has the reputation for deciding these cases based on the facts and the law and nothing else.
Thank you, John. Leora, 1 minute to you for a rebuttal.
One other point that I wanted to make is one of my bigger opportunities and responsibilities was when I served as general counsel at the Auraria campus downtown. And they have a unique individual police department that reported to me during COVID, post George Floyd, on the largest, most diverse campus in our state. And that was a time of awakening in this country. And it was a time of personal awakening as well, where I began to think about safety as a bigger issue than just policing. And how do we support police, and how do we support district attorneys? How do we support communities by making sure everyone along the safety spectrum is connected? We have to connect police with fire, with ambulance, with Denver Health, with mental health, with the faith community. All the pieces have to come together and be together in order to create safe neighborhoods and safe communities.
We'll now move on to question number 4, which deals with your policy on prosecuting low-level crimes that impact the quality of life of downtown Denver residents and businesses. Low-level crimes, often called quality of life crimes, are sometimes not prosecuted out of a belief that the person shouldn't have a criminal record over such a low-level crime. However, these crimes can affect the quality of life of nearby residents and businesses and can impact important tourism dollars because tourists and conventions may choose to avoid the city. Additionally, retail businesses suffer significant economic impacts due to the material losses they experience due to theft, which has led to store closures. Some examples of these crimes include littering, graffiti, shoplifting, and disorderly conduct. So the question is, as the DA, what will your policy be on prosecuting low-level crimes? Leora, we'll start with you, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Basic accountability means that criminal acts need to have consequences. Bottom line, full stop. The issue, though, of the power of the district attorney is to help determine what are those consequences. And that's where the work gets exciting and where we have opportunity for new leadership and creative development. And I'll be clear. When we deal with the mental health, the substance misuse disorder that people are struggling with right now, I think we can all agree jail and prison are not going to get us out of this problem. Those low-level offenses like trespass or throwing a brick through a building are affecting people's quality of life every single day, no question. But locking up a person with severe mental illness doesn't make anybody safer. The work I do now for Governor Polis's office has allowed me to watch models and learn from around the country, models that work, that allow us to take people with severe mental illness and severe substance misuse disorders and use the court system, instead of putting them in jail, monitoring them in a treatment facility, moving them into day reporting centers or hospitals, allowing people to really rehabilitate, get better, be well. And that is how we begin to handle a lot of these crimes that are the quality of life crimes, the crimes that all of us feel every day when we walk the streets and we feel dysregulated or we see dysregulated behavior. But I'll tell you what isn't working. Ignoring. That doesn't work. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't uplift the public, and it doesn't help the individual. We are seeing individuals on our streets who are struggling. They are sick. And we have got to stop ignoring them. We have got to find ways to use the courts, and I've seen it work in cities like Miami, where they've been able to reduce all of their arrests, specifically their felony arrests, their quality of life crimes, and their homeless population from 8,000 people to 1,000 people, using the model that I plan to bring to Denver. Making sure people are getting into the treatment that they need, making sure people are being monitored by a court, a probate court, not a criminal court, and getting access to medication, treatment, housing, supportive housing. All of those things along the safety spectrum are what is going to keep all of us safe and protect us and protect people who are sick and struggling.
John, 3 minutes to you.
So a couple of thoughts that I want to sort of describe to you all on this issue, because substance abuse is one of the main drivers of this. I think we all know that, as well as mental health issues. We are doing a terrible job of actually addressing those issues in practice. To accomplish that, I think what we need to be thinking about is expanding the use of the drug court here in Denver, which is still reasonably small, as well as working on other community-based substance use disorder treatment centers, as well as mental health centers. But you know what? As I go out and talk to folks, I talk to people at the Sobriety House, I talk to people at the Harm Reduction Action Center, and there are very few of those programs available right now. Where the DA can play an incredibly important role is to advocate for those programs and also use the moment when someone gets caught up in the criminal justice system as the moment where we then ensure that they get pushed towards the treatment and they get the treatment that they need. Here's the second thought, though, that I think is really important to consider. Downtown Denver has been suffering tremendously over these last few years, and we're at a tipping point. I think we're all afraid we're at a tipping point where this downtown is not going to come back. That is having an enormous effect on everyone throughout the city's perception of public safety and community safety. I strongly believe that one of the most important things the DA can do, the next DA can do, is sit down with our new mayor, sit down with the police chief, sit down with other other agencies, and come up with a comprehensive plan for how we're going to address all of this. We all wish that there were better community treatment options out there. Those don't get set up overnight. We need an immediate plan that doesn't involve just putting people in jail and cycling them through. And it's not just downtown. It's places like South Broadway and other parts of this city where we need to have a concerted response plan so that those communities are not suffering systematically the way they are. I think we all know that the 16th Street Mall project has had an additional sort of multiplying effect on the problems that downtown is experiencing. When that project is done, which probably won't happen soon enough, but when it is done, that moment is going to be so crucial for the city to come together, make sure businesses feel safe coming down, make sure that people feel safe coming back downtown, so that the economic vibrancy of the heart of the city comes back. And so I will commit to you that one of the most important plans that I will work on from day one as district attorney is how we are going to turn around the center city of Denver and make sure it's safe, clean, and economically vibrant once again.
Leora, we'll go to you for a 1-minute rebuttal.
The role of the district attorney is to help fashion alternatives to jail, to help make probationary sentences that have real consequences, to help make sure people are facing the justice system in the right way. We're all better than the worst thing we've ever done. And that's also the role of the DA, to acknowledge when those opportunities, what are the opportunities for education, and what are the opportunities, though, where it's time to send someone to jail, when we have repeat offenders, when we have violent offenders, when we have people who are simply not stopping. And we know from what we know about crime that it is a small group of people committing the same crimes over and over and over. And those are the people that my office will target and make sure we're getting the people who need the help into treatment. That's the power that the district attorney has. And then making sure the people who are real community safety risks, who are dangerous, are behind bars, so that we can have a vibrant downtown and bring our city back.
John, 1 minute to you.
I have spoken to so many substance use disorder counselors who have told me, various folks have told me, that when you're dealing with these sorts of issues that lead to these quality of life problems, when you're dealing with someone who's addicted or having these troubles, that you need to bring a combination of empathy and consequences. And that if you have only consequences, you're not going to address it. And if you have only empathy, you're not going to address it either. It's that mix of making sure that we approach people as human beings to get them out of the terrible circumstances they're in, but by imposing consequences so that they are incentivized to make sure that they'll help themselves.
Thank you both. At this time, we'd like to take a 10-minute or so break in order to stretch your legs, visit the restroom, which is straight out this way. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Reminder, if you would, please silence your cell phones yet again. Thank you for your decorum through the first portion of the debate. And with that, we will continue with the second portion of our debate in question number 5. This question asks for the candidates' views on criminal justice reform. Crime and disorder began to increase in Denver a few years before the pandemic, and since then the crime rates of some types of crimes have recently decreased while others have remained stubbornly high. There is a portion of the population that believes that we have become soft on crime. Some people say it's because the legislature has redefined crimes as misdemeanors and has reduced penalties, while at the same time hobbling the police. Others will say that judges have become more lenient and willing to shorten sentences or release criminals back to the street. Another common belief is that the police are not aggressively pursuing criminal activity because they feel their hands are tied or they're tired of repeatedly arresting the same perpetrators. In the middle of all this is the district attorney, who some criticize for choosing not to file cases, for pleading serious crimes down to lesser sentences, and for leaving criminals on the street. The DA is criticized for using community corrections and diversion programs instead of prosecution and some severe sentences or more severe sentences. So which parts of this worldwide view are false and which are true? Does the DA need to take a stronger stance? How will you work with the other participants in the process to correct these problems? For this question, we will start with John. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So when we're considering, without a doubt, there are people who have this perception that the criminal justice system isn't working effectively to protect the community. And you can see why sometimes, as you walk around the city and you have this situation we talked about a little bit earlier where there are repeat offenders who are getting PR bonds. I will tell you that you have to look at each different category of crime separately to determine what the best approach is on this. But I'm going to give you an overview comment, and that is this. It is so important, and I've mentioned this before, that the DA's office work to build a strong and effective working relationship with the police. That means communication at all levels, from the DA and command staff level down to the line prosecutor, working with the police so that there's a shared mission on how cases are going to be handled. That's something that I've spent a lifetime as a prosecutor working on and have been successful on. It's that shared sense of confidence that everyone knows where the team is going, so to speak. So I'll start with that. I will tell you that when you actually look at the statistics on things like community corrections and diversion programs, they actually have a high rate of success in many instances. There's a restorative justice program, it's a small program in the Denver DA's office right now that has a 97% success rate. In other words, those offenders are not going out and offending again, except in 3% of the cases. That would be a tremendous rate if we could get that across the board. Having said that, I think there are areas where we absolutely need to focus attention. One of those areas is violent crime and youth violence. Because while some areas of crime have dropped in the last few years, violent crime has not dropped as much. And youth violence has actually increased over time. I think we can be tough on crime and be tough on the causes of crime, and the most effective way of approaching violent crime, for example, is going to be identifying what is still a small set of people who are pulling triggers and hurting other people and shooting other people, prosecuting them, getting them off the streets, and at the same time making sure we're aggressively out there in the community so that young people have development opportunities and other programs so that they don't get pulled into the sort of gang violence or other group violence that can ruin so many lives. So that's just one example of where we need to be more aggressive, both in a traditional enforcement way, but also in a community-oriented way, because what really matters at the end of the day is that we bring those crime rates down. And there are multiple ways to get that done.
We will have 3 minutes to you.
You know, at some point, perception is reality, and reality is perception. And I think one of the most troubling things that I've met with in meeting with voters over the last 8 months is this incredible disconnect between the police department and the district attorney's office. And that this lack of communication, a lack of understanding, and I find that troublesome. And my campaign manager is going to kill me because we're not supposed to release this until next week, but I'm so honored that the Protective Police Association has endorsed me in this race. Exactly because we need to have better communication. We need to be explaining to each other why and how we're making decisions and having that communication so we understand when decisions are being made in order to make sure that we are keeping our communities safe and everybody understands the standards, everybody understands what we need to do. I think one of the troublesome aspects that happens, and I think it might affect some of the practices right now, is what I call the failure to make your bed argument. And that's the argument that goes like this: why bother making my bed in the morning? I'm gonna get back in it in 18 hours. Many people in the prosecution world today are taking that attitude. What's the point of prosecuting this case? The maximum they can get is 6 months. The maximum they can get is 30 days. That is not how we make change. We make change by taking the laws we have and enforcing them, and then we go to the legislature and say, guys, this isn't working because we've been enforcing these cases and no one's being held accountable. The opportunities for rehabilitation don't exist. But first you have to use the systems that we have. We can't give up and just say, I'm not going to make my bed. I'm not going to pursue this. That is apathy. And we can't allow that in our criminal justice system. We need to change how people are doing things. We need to change the energy level in the DA's office to get people excited again, to be part of change, to be part of making sure we're both protecting the public and offering real opportunities so that it's not this catch and release, daily revolving door of recidivism for people who are sick and end up arrested one day and out the next hour. That does nothing. So this bifurcated system of catch and release needs to end immediately. We need to really, really focus on how we are going to make sustainable change that everybody buys into, and it starts with partnerships. Partnerships between the DA's office and the police are the beginning of that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would ask that you would please hold your applause and comments. You'll each have 1 minute for a rebuttal. John, we'll go to you.
So I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with my colleague here. I've spoken to so many people in the DA's office, and there's not a culture of apathy in the DA's office. There is not a culture of not making their beds. These are folks who are working really hard. They care very deeply about the city. They need leadership that's going to let them move forward in a way and let them make the arguments that they have, but they are not apathetic. There is not a situation there where they're letting this go by. I have enormous confidence that with a refresh on leadership that we're going to be able to turn that situation around completely. And I have to speak up in their defense.
Leora, 1 minute to you.
Let me be clear, I have many friends in the DA's office and they are doing unbelievable work. The issue is the leadership. That's where the change needs to be. We need leadership that is going to look at this city, look at the problems, meet with voters, meet with police, and understand where people are at. We need leadership in the district attorney's office that doesn't hide behind an office, but is out there in community, that is working with the schools, that is working with the mental health institutions, that's working with Denver Health, our precious, precious Denver Health, and making sure everything we do is together and united. Instead of these fights between the district attorney and the chief of police, that doesn't make anybody safer. That doesn't cause people to believe in the justice system. When that happens, everything breaks down. This is a leadership issue. The people in the DA's office are good people, public servants, and I've been honored to support them and stand with them, and I will continue to do so.
Now to question 6, which concerns the transparency of the Denver Attorney's Office, the Denver District Attorney's Office. Please note that you will have 1 minute each to answer this question with no rebuttals. The City of Denver has a transparency dashboard which provides significant data on rates of reported crimes in a neighborhood-by-neighborhood basis. This provides the citizens and voters with information that allows them to evaluate for themselves whether DPD and elected officials are doing their jobs. The District Attorney's Office could, and some say should, have a similar dashboard that shows the number of actual cases that have been referred to them and how many of those cases have been referred to trial. This would allow the voters to evaluate for themselves whether the District Attorney's Office is effectively doing its job. Currently, the DA's dashboard is significantly less detailed and less informative. So the question is, would you commit to implementing a similar dashboard if you are elected? And for this question, we will start with you, Leora, 1 minute.
I am completely committed to transparency. We need to have a data dashboard that doesn't only include this kind of information, but actually includes racial data, that includes plea bargain information, that includes real transparency on results, that includes information about gender and economic backgrounds when pleas are being evaluated. All of that needs to be out there up front for the voters. This is the people's office, and the information has to be accessible. But I want to say something about transparency. You've seen my brochures, my business cards, for those of you who've taken them today. They all have my cell phone on it. And that is my real cell phone. It's the same number my kids use. And that's transparency too. You all have access to me, and you'll continue to have access to me.
John, 1 minute to you.
I believe that there needs to be a very strong effort to improve the quality of the dashboard and transparency. I think it's also crucially important that we take a look at what the data is that's available to be incorporated into that and how it's being collected. One of the things that happened recently in the Denver DA's office that I strongly applaud is outside experts came in to look at the data and determine whether or not there was any racial bias or gender bias in the way, or impact that in the way that the office was making its decisions. That kind of work needs to continue, and I think it needs to be transparent to the community. I'll also just say that my cell phone is on my business card as well.
That is the end of our prepared questions. Now each candidate will ask the opponent 2 questions. The normal 3-minute time will be allowed for the answers. There will be no rebuttals. For the first question, John will go, and then for the second question, LeDora will go, and then we will reverse the order as follows. So John will ask his question, LeDora will ask her first question, and then LeDora will ask her second question, and John will ask his second question. So John, if you would, please ask your first question.
So, Leora, in the course of the campaign and this evening as well, you have talked about the importance of improving the way our state handles mental health treatment, especially as it affects the way that the courts and criminal justice works. And you've been working in the state government, leading that effort for the last 18 months or 20 months. You can correct me as to how long. But the state is still struggling on those issues, and in fact, is in violation of a federal consent decree. And I guess my question to you is, isn't the best way for you to continue to make progress on those very issues to stay where you are and make sure the state addresses those issues rather than leaving to come to the Denver District Attorney's Office?
Thanks, John, for that question. It's been an incredible honor to work for the governor, overseeing an 1,800-person agency with a $350 million budget. And I'm so proud of the work we've been doing. I can tell you that in the last 6 months, because of some of the efforts that we've been put into place, we've seen a reduction in the federal lawsuit. The basis of that is a wait list. We've seen a 1/3 reduction in that wait list. People are getting into treatment because of changes I've put into place along with the amazing people that I work with. And we are predicting within the next few months that we will be able to comply with what the goal is, which is to get Coloradans into treatment. And I'm also super excited that we opened new mental health transition living homes, the first in the country, allowing people who've been institutionalized in hospitals for multiple years to live in small group homes with full supervision, but allow them a little bit more independence and engagement with community. And so, you know, John, I've done a lot of good work in the next few months, and I'm ready to take on the district attorney's office and bring the lessons that I've learned from this work, the professional behavioral health experience. I have learned so much to bring that specifically into this city, the city that I love. And that's why I'm running to be the next Denver DA.
Thank you, Leora. Now, if you would, please ask your first question for John.
Sure.
You know, John, I've been running now for about 8 months or so, and everywhere I go, I meet people who love Denver, but feel the need for change. They don't feel like things are working right now. One of your most prominent endorsers is the current district attorney, who's not only endorsed you, but has been a really active part of your campaign, speaking for you at caucus, hosting gatherings and fundraisers for you. How do you balance that with the need that Denver has for dramatic and serious change?
So I believe that there does need to be significant change, and that we need to bring a refresh in leadership and greater energy into the office. I'm proud to have Beth McCann's endorsement for a lot of the reform work that she's done over the last few years. She set a tone and a baseline for reform that will make it easier for whoever the next DA is to continue those reforms that have to happen to ensure that we have a criminal justice system that is actually fair to all people and that is earning the trust of all people. But I think it's important to note that I don't just have the endorsement of Beth McCann. I have the endorsement of Mitch Morrissey, the prior district attorney of Denver. And I have the endorsement of Bill Ritter, the prior district attorney to that. And on top of that, I have the endorsement of 8 other Democratic district attorneys around the state, including Michael Dougherty in Boulder, Brian Mason in Adams County, Heidi McCullum up in the mountains, Jeff Chostner in Pueblo. These are not just political endorsements. These are people I have worked with. They bring different approaches to these problems. They know that I know how to run a big prosecution office and do it effectively and do it with success in fighting crime and energizing and leading people and, crucially, collaborating with the other offices around them. That is so important. So to focus simply on Beth, whose endorsement I am proud of, completely misses the overall picture that I have, in fact, 11 DAs who have endorsed me, as well as 3 of our former mayors, former governors as well, people who've worked with me and know that I know how to bring people together. Attorney General Holder, when I was heading his National Attorney General's Advisory Committee during the Obama administration, always used to say to us, you're prosecutors first and foremost, but what you really are as well is community problem solvers. You need to bring people together because no office is big enough or effective enough to solve these problems. That's why all these DAs have endorsed me, because they know that's the kind of person I am, and that's how I will approach this. We are going to change things here in Denver. There's no question about it.
John, thank you. Leora, if you would, please ask your second question.
John, you and I have had, we're both lawyers, but we've had really, really different career paths. I've spent my career in district attorney's offices handling state crimes, focusing on gritty crimes, domestic violence, human trafficking, sex assault, daily crimes, drug addiction, and solving problems for the mental health crisis that we're in. Your experience, both as a federal prosecutor, was at a bit of a higher level, white collar crime, RICO, and the past few years in a private law firm defending corporate interests and large corporations. How are you going to make that transition into really day-to-day prosecutions, quality of life crimes?
So let me begin by saying that I think it's the breadth of my legal experience that everyone in Denver should be happy that I have in approaching this. I started my career as an assistant U.S. attorney in Los Angeles in gritty street crimes during what I always call the bad old days in Los Angeles, during the crack epidemic and the Pablo Escobar days in the late 80s and early 90s. I am no stranger to those cases. I am also no stranger to supervising and handling those cases as the U.S. attorney for the District of Colorado. But I'll tell you, I'm enormously proud of the fact that I've spent so much time prosecuting large white-collar cases. Attorney General Holder asked me to be one of the leads for the national response to the financial crisis and misconduct of the banks. And in that capacity, we were able to recover tens of billions of dollars for the people of the United States. And also, when I was in private practice, I worked tirelessly on crucial issues that I think everyone in this room cares about, whether it's reproductive freedoms or rights in the LGBT community. It's that breadth of experience on the civil side and on the criminal side, and even defending criminal defendants that will make me a far better district attorney for the city and will enable me to lead that office with great success. It's that breadth of supervision and managerial and legal experience that I've had that you should be particularly valuing, and I hope you will.
John, if you would now please ask your second question to Leora.
So, Leora, in the course of the evening tonight, multiple times you've said you've spent 20 years in the district attorney office. And I just want to be clear so that everyone, especially the people who may be watching this on video after the fact, know what that actually means. Because could you tell us how long you have spent in the Denver District Attorney's Office?
Sure. Thanks, John. So the 20 years that I've spent, Leora Joseph for the People, I've spent about 16 of those were in Boston, where I was the chief of the sex crimes unit during the clergy abuse crisis, and took on the church and made changes and started one of the first human trafficking units in the country. And then I went to the Arapahoe District Attorney's Office and worked there for about 6 years, running their SVU unit, their sex crimes unit. I started a human trafficking unit in Arapahoe County as well as a felony domestic violence unit. I only spent a few months in the Denver DA's office before I was chosen to be chief of staff at the Attorney General's office for 1 year as a really unique opportunity to help the Attorney General at that point begin the prosecution of the clergy abuse crisis here in Colorado, making sure the church was held accountable, starting a statewide domestic violence fatality review board. Nothing like that exists anywhere in the country. It's something I'm really excited and proud of that work. And beginning the important work of the opioid legislation, which all of us now, the settlements that are coming out, that work began while I was serving as chief of staff in the Attorney General's office.
We'll now move into the final closing statements from each candidate. Each of you will have 3 minutes for your summary. John, if you would begin, please.
So you've heard a lot of discussion tonight about a lot of issues and in some detail, but I want to bring you back to some big picture thoughts and to what I said at the beginning about President Obama very specifically saying you need to be prosecutors for the people. That's the kind of DA that I will be. And that means I will be a DA that is out in the community, that is with all of you in these organizations, but also out in communities in Montbello, Green Valley Ranch on the west side, working with those communities directly. And it's important that we listen. So let me give you a few examples of the stories I've heard and the responses I've been privileged to hear. You know, in an event, probably as many people as are here tonight, a young man stood up and raised his hand and confessed publicly to the fact that he'd been struggling with addiction and was only just beginning to come out of those terrible moments. And he had very specific recommendations for what law enforcement should do. I sat with a high school dean who had been grievously shot and injured by a very troubled young man at East High School, whose physical scars had healed, but whose mental scars were going to take much longer to fade. That's the same high school my kids went to. I sat with so many different parents, people of color, who've expressed not just concern, but actual fear that their sons and daughters would not be treated fairly by a criminal justice system that has utterly failed to earn their trust. And at the same time as I heard those things, sometimes in the same conversations, I have heard so much strength and resilience and hope from the people of Denver, whether it's former gang members in Montbello who every day when school closes go out and scoop kids up and move them into development programs, things like music, sports, even a robotics program. Or the substance abuse counselors that I've worked with, that I've had a chance to talk to, who work so patiently. And again, I want to emphasize the quality of the people in the Denver District Attorney's Office is excellent. We need to energize them and lead them. They are doing extraordinary work, and you should be very proud of what they're doing. That isn't to say that we don't need to change. We do. So let me take a step back and just say this. I can't promise you specific results. And if anyone does promise you specific results, they're not being honest with you. What I can tell you is that I will throw myself into this job with every ounce and every bit of passion I have, because my life has revolved around this city and about public safety and about community. And you have my promise I'll do that. I would love your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Leora will now go to you for your closing statement, 3 minutes.
Thanks. I entered the race to be Denver's next district attorney because I have real experience and real solutions to solve the problems we're facing. I've been meeting with people all over our city who love Denver and want to see solutions. They want to see big change, and that's what's needed to turn our city around. I don't think that even President Obama could predict where we are today, post-pandemic, in a city where we have so many people suffering, so much trauma, so much pain. And the solution to that is justice. That is what will uplift people. That is what will uplift communities. And I'm the only candidate in the race that's worked in the district attorney's office. I'm the only candidate in the race that's managed and led teams in the district attorney's office. And I'm the only candidate in the race with professional behavioral health experience. In all the places I've been, I've made change, starting one of the country's first human trafficking units in the district attorney's office, handling here in Colorado the first homicide case of a dealer who dealt opioids, causing overdose deaths in young adults. And now the work I'm doing for Governor Polis, opening up the new mental health transition living homes that I just spoke about, giving people a real opportunity with severe mental illness to start an independent life. I am offering real accountability in my administration. We can throw the book at the gun crimes. We will even prosecute auto theft. But at the same time, we will find real pathways to move the sick people off of our streets and into treatment. We can no longer ignore the crimes. We can no longer ignore people who are sick and suffering. That is inhumane, and it must stop. And at the same time, I'm promising to the people of Denver real community prosecution model where prosecutors are going to be responsible and responsive to neighborhoods. My community engagement office will be large. We'll have liaisons to the public schools. We'll have liaisons to mental health, to nonprofits, everybody aligning along the safety spectrum so that we can all make sure you all have a seat at the table. I'm Leora Joseph for the people. I'm Leora Joseph for all of you. Together, we're going to make Denver safer for everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our candidate debate for the district attorney. A reminder that ballots for the primary will be mailed out to registered Democrats and Independents in June. Please remember to cast your vote. On behalf of the Upper Downtown Neighborhood Association, the Lower Downtown Neighborhood Association, and the LoDo District, thank you to the candidates as well as to you, the audience, for your participation tonight. My name is Michael Spencer. It's been my pleasure to serve as your moderator. I'll see you tonight on CBS News Colorado at 10 o'clock and tomorrow at 5, 6, and 10. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Have a great evening.